Here we are with the Brain Trust. Ben Burgis, he's author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, Bhaskar, of course, Socialist Manifesto, and the founder of Jacobin Magazine. I've been wanting to. Have you guys met before?
No, not in the flesh.
Well, here we are. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this, actually, because I want to get into the Meidner plan, which is really important. And maybe you could outline it, Bhaskar, but I actually want to put this in conversation in the last segment before we go to the post game. I want to put this in conversation with the debunk that Ben and I did last week about would a greater, in a very broad sense, because I actually want to move, I think co-ops are cool, but I want to move well beyond co-ops. I want to move to stakeholdership. I want to, because maybe that's also the wrong word, but just some idea of far more power over your economic life and far more leisure time and far more basic power to do what you will in an economic sense, right? So, but that being said, the debate that Ben had with Destiny, who's a prominent Twitch streamer,
Really?
which sounded funny. Yeah, that's actually what he is. Destiny's in fact, Destiny does a very good job at this stuff. He's in this new New York Times piece.
Twitch streaming is like the gaming thing, right?
He plays video games and talks about politics. I have no idea, dude. Don't ask. Don't.
I'm just getting sorry. I don't want to derail.
You're getting so
I don't know.
sidetracked.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean,
Bhaskar is Larry Daviding me here. It's like Twitch stream.
Yeah.
What does he Twitch?
yeah. I mean, I don't think I've played a video game since like Mario Kart. So I don't I was doing
I wasn't allowed to play video games because it would have gotten in the way with my astrology.
I played video games as soon as I finished this book. I played Red Dead Redemption. It was
there
great.
you go. That's very
half of it was like you had a horse. It was your friend. You fed it. You did chores. There was lots of chores. Anyways,
the point of the debate. Destiny did a great job.
Astrology is really bad.
Shut up. Don't bring that nerd shit to my show. So, unless in the way we like it. He's bad. Shut up. Whatever. I will. So what'd you say?
Said he's such a Libra.
Yeah, exactly. That was such a Libra thing to say. Or whatever sign says.
Yeah, I just don't think my personal branding can survive me sitting here listening to stuff about astrology and not saying anything.
Well, no, it's all right. I mean, look, even if you don't believe in it, it believes in you. So, anyways, but I wanted to give Destiny props. In the piece in the New York Times on YouTube radicalization, which we'll talk about another time, he was actually cited as an example of this kid exiting the fascist right because of his debate skills. So props to Destiny. The debate
got a DM from that kid a few months ago saying like, hey, your videos helped me. So that was cool.
That is very cool. So this kid got turned on to all the good stuff. Maybe you got a DM from him too, right?
Yeah, I've been DM with him for a while.
Yeah, Matt's just like, my DMs aren't open. I'm sure that's why, obviously. So, anyways,
he specifically told me that when he watched this show, that almost brought him back into the alt right. But but then this
because I said, I think you
Yeah.
can believe that obviously we should have a sense of the planetary alignment, and that doesn't mean that we should have a fascist government.
Listen, if the moon can impact the tides, you don't think it can fuck with your brain? Think about it.
Yeah.
Think about it. You heard it first.
Thank you.
You also don't want to expose somebody that early in the re-education process to right-wing Mandela, I feel like.
Really? You're going to watch Ben Burgis?
I'm a siren song.
Yeah, let's put you to work at Mondragon. You'd probably prefer to smoke weed and watch Rolling Stones montage videos. Meanwhile, Bhaskar, his parents flee the fucking Caribbean via sniper territory so they can get a real fucking job. And he's running around talking about how they should turn the whole world into a fucking subpar Caribbean economy. Fucking cocks. I miss doing that. So, they were debating, can co-op, worker-owned economies have an effect on the climate crisis? And I want to put that in relationship to outlining the Meidner plan and really opening the dimension of workplace democracy and the other part of the subtitle of your book, which is a case for socialism in an age of extreme inequality and planetary crisis, if I recall correctly. So let's bring those two things in relationship, and maybe could we use the Meidner plan to help sort of set that up?
Okay, so the Meidner plan.
Yes.
It's a bit complicated because I could give you the very simple version, but I'll give you the intermediate version, which is
Nice.
the Swedish system is very unusual in that the welfare state was not created just by the state. In fact, a lot of the system was actually created by collective bargaining. So you have this massive trade union federation, the LO, and also there's a large employer federation, the SAF, and they set certain patterns of bargaining based on the principle of equal pay for equal work, not just within one workplace, but across all the workplaces in a sector, which means that essentially if the three of us are running different businesses, and let's say you're running GM, I'm running Ford, and you're running Chrysler, right? Yeah.
Ben totally got fucked in this analogy.
Let's say in this case,
You know, I'm literally from Lansing, Michigan, where Fords were traditionally produced. I think I should get Fords.
okay, well,
No, you're a Chrysler, just accept it.
You're about to be bought out by like the Italians.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
disgraceful.
Oh, look, Fila called. They want to own your company now. Cock. The first car company to be taken over by an 80s sneaker firm. Ben Burgis as Chrysler.
So you have GM is the most efficient producer, right? So they are the most productive firm. Let's say Ford is in the middle and Chrysler is at the bottom.
Definitely.
So what you would do in a sectoral bargaining agreement is you would set your wages not on your ability to bargain in your particular workplace or even in your particular company, but you would set it to some sort of benchmark level. So we would maybe set wages in this agreement at my firm's level because I'm in the middle, which means essentially that Chrysler would be squeezed by the high militant wage demands, and in fact might go out of business. You would either have to figure out a way to become more productive, you develop more new labor techniques or whatever else, or you would go out of business.
Even in a cock economy like Sweden, survival of the fittest is what Bhaskar is saying.
Yes, it would be. It
yes.
would be, actually. Yeah, it was actually quite a dynamic economy.
Yes,
so these
this
wage
is actually
demands,
important. The dumb commentary
you can't move
provides
that
the
quickly
point.
from Mandela to real. You know.
I was trying to set you up, though. This is relevant. It was a very dynamic economy.
So what that does, though, is it allows me to survive, right? Because it's set at the wages that I can afford, but it allows you excess profits. So in other words, if we were in a sectoral system, it's possible that your workers might actually be able to demand even higher wages, whatever else, but they're actually setting their demands pegged to me in the middle, right? So this excess profit, in theory, allows you to expand production. So the workers displaced in your firm could in fact then, through active labor market policies and government retraining and whatnot, they bounce in this cushy welfare state that's been created. Then they're actually moving into your sector. So the most efficient firms, the firms that are, it encourages one, capital intent, basically labor saving technology. So that's why Swedish firms ended up being super high tech and whatever else, because like labor was expensive. But it allowed the most efficient firms to expand. And then you can imagine this cycle continuing, whereas maybe this time, like I'm at the bottom rung and there's another company in the middle or whatever else. So what happened in the 70s was the Swedish labor movement started saying, well, not only are we discontent with the level of industrial democracy, not only do we want to push social democracy even further, and we're kind of frustrated by all these capitals, we're finding that Swedish capital is no longer productively investing these excess profits. So instead of you being the most efficient firm, then taking these profits to expand your production, Swedish capital is just kind of sitting on it. So the logic of the labor movement was that we in fact are subsidizing the most efficient firms, whereas we want to recapture some of that wealth and we want to actually make sure that it's put to good use. So the idea of the Meidner plan wasn't just an ideological thing. Workers should slowly take over their firms through creating these wage earner funds and whatnot. It was also practical. We want this capital better invested. So we're going to try to capture this capital. And the idea was that there would be a slow accumulation, slow buying up of shares where in the course of 20 to 30 years, these funds run by the trade unions would slowly buy up shares in the firms to the point that, maybe in 20 years they become the majority shareholder. And they could also demand that, in fact, this excess profits are actually used and expand in the economy and so on. So it was meant at different levels. When they passed the Meidner plan, they sang the Internationale. They thought it was a socialist triumph for ideological reasons, but also had this practical element too.
So bring that into relationship, if you can, with this debate. I mean, because again, there is a lot of bridges here. I mean, I would imagine that this might also correlate with why, and related in some respects to the technological innovations, why obviously a place like Sweden has a much better environmental performance. Like, the argument was, and actually I'm trying to represent him well, because in a narrow sense it makes a lot of sense, which is like, if environmental problems are exacerbated because basically private firms discard concern for a global environment or even a local one because it undermines their profit accumulation, why would that same sort of logic necessarily have a major impact even if the firm was more democratized? And I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the process by which you would start to actually democratize these firms would entail such a sort of structural reorganization, how you're doing the economy to begin with, that it would necessarily have a spillover effect. And therefore it would be different than, as an example, AFL-CIO, who I actually have a lot of respect for, and I think we need to pay much more proper respect to our old school unions, whatever their many flaws. But people will say, like, hey, look, the AFL-CIO will come out and support some destructive environmental policy or oppose a Green New Deal in some ways, which is, not good. But they're doing it in the sense of trying to fight for scraps in a capitalist economy, not in the Meidner plan or what you were advocating, which would necessarily have a spillover effect.
Yeah. in the discussion with Destiny, I was doing what I usually do when I talk to like skeptical progressives who like maybe agree with me about a lot of social democratic stuff,
right,
but like aren't sure about the idea that we could go beyond capitalism entirely, which, is a variation of what Bhaskar does in his book, which is to sort of say, well, not that this is necessarily the, the last possible step in the evolution of social organization. I've got that inner Dave Grisham in my head, saying, now this isn't nearly communist enough. That's not,
after you explain that, David's going to explain what communism is, and that's when we're going to go to the post game.
Okay.
Yeah. I only have the best brains around me, so David keeps teasing it. Now I want to hear it.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
But like, one of my favorite articles from your magazine over the years was The Red and the Black by Seth Ackerman, and he's got a really nice like methodological point at the beginning about how it's good to start with something that you can realistically imagine based on what you have, not because that should be the outer limits of your imagination, but precisely because by establishing the point that we could go beyond capitalism, it actually expands our imagination. So. Right. The version of it that I was trying to push with Destiny was basically like what you get in a lot of DSA documents, which is, hey, we could nationalize the commanding heights, some things like healthcare that meet basic human needs. There's plenty of precedent for advanced Western democracies doing these things effectively, like the NHS in Britain. Right. Or for that matter, the coal industry in Britain for a long time. If we do still need a private sector, or something like a private sector for the sake of solving calculation problems, setting prices, all that, then, hey, at least it can be a cooperative private sector. And I think that in a certain sense, right, this is the point that Hassan Piker was objecting to, right? When I kind of said, yeah, well, okay, that's a fair concern, but I've got some responses. I do think that Destiny's point is not totally unreasonable. He says, hey, to the extent that you're saying, don't worry, this would still have the benefits in terms of market mechanisms for dealing with calculation problems, et cetera, that capitalism does, then it's open to the concern that, wait a second, it would still have the same bad market incentives for things like climate change that capitalism would have. And I tried to respond in a few ways. So just real quick, one of them was the point that Hassan wanted to emphasize, which was that at least certain forms of environmentally damaging activity, like fracking, actually have really bad consequences for the communities of the workers who are engaged.
Where obviously the workers will have a totally different incentive structure to care for themselves than an outside owner, capital. Yes.
Exactly. And I think
that's a strong argument.
And I think that is a really strong argument, but I don't think it's enough. The reason I don't think it's enough is that it's good for, like, oh wow, the fracking is, fracking up the water, but it's a little bit less effective for, we're just slowly eroding the ozone layer, which has bad long-term consequences for all humans, workers or owners. But doesn't necessarily have short-term enough bad consequences for the workers to be motivated by it. And so, which is why I tried not to rest there. I kind of mentioned the point Hassan wanted to mention, but I also said, taking a page from the first chapter of the Socialist Manifesto, that, hey,
you're doing a good job plugging my book. I'm liking this. I'm liking this. This is a smart man right here.
See, there is a methodology to guest selection. These like shabby intellectual bastards who come on my show never understand the design.
It's a pretty good book. If you could only afford one of them, you should give them an argument. But if you can afford both, you should also get that one. But taking a page from the first chapter there, there's a discussion about how if we nationalize the banks, then we can set as a matter of public policy that one of the criteria you use to decide which new cooperative ventures get business loans is environmental impact, and there's really no equivalent that we can do with completely private free market capitalism to that, right? Like there's really no way to get private banks to take that into consideration the way that we could, I think, with public banks.
And under either capitalism or the system, you could also use the state. You could use legislation to set certain. So even if the micro logic of a firm is to pollute, you could regulate. And that's so. In other words, like even climate change itself can be solved within capitalism if there was a strong enough state and regulations and things like that.
So that's also the other, and this is, I think, a little bit trickier. This is maybe the reason some of this got lost in the debate, because you have to sort of go back a couple more levels to kind of think about how this works. With Destiny, that some of the things that I'm talking about under a form of democratic socialism that would help with climate change are on paper things that you could have under capitalism. Right. So, for example, if you had a universal jobs guarantee, which has often been proposed as a reform under capitalism, that was a major theme of the civil rights movement, in the last stages. Right. Then you would have a totally different set of incentives for workers, because even a coal mining cooperative, even if that wasn't nationalized, even if it was a private or quasi-private cooperative, that wouldn't have those incentives to despoil the earth for future generations for the sake of having jobs right now, or at least not as strongly if like having to transition to something new didn't mean going through this period of destitution while you're waiting for the new thing to kick in. And so I think it's fair that somebody like Destiny could say, hey, but wait a second, we could do that under capitalism. But then I think the point is, well, there's a reason that hasn't happened under capitalism. And this, I kind of feel like like I've already praised the book competition too much, but like I'll give in one more time and say that this is one of the major themes of Bhaskar's book, that they have that there is, like he quotes repeatedly Rosa Luxemburg's metaphor about rolling the boulder up the hill, right, with reforms. And as long as we still got capitalism, there's always the danger that, to one extent or another, it's not instantaneous. The Nordics are still, way ahead of us, but the boulder is going to be rolled back down the hill by the capitalists. And so this would be a particularly hard ask for capitalists to accept, because a universal job guarantee would really change the balance of power on the shop floor between workers and owners.
So basically, in all scenarios, you're agents of the Chinese hoax. But
go ahead. Two more things to this thing of climate change. I agree with everything you said, but I would add that, one, if your incentive in a worker-owned firm is to maximize not total profits, but profit per worker, there's less of the imperative to just grow. So I would guess that under a kind of worker-controlled economy, even if it's still a market economy, the average firm size will be lower, production will be lower, and the footprint of every firm would potentially be lower. It might actually be, though, that there might be like environmental benefits to a certain scale. So I'm just like that's a half-formed thought. And the second thing is, under any system of socialism, it means that even if we still have a sphere where firms are competing in the market and producing consumer goods, it also means that the commanding heights of the economy, all the natural monopolies and things like that, would still be under the purview of the state. So there'd be a lot more democratic planning going on anyway. And the state can actually set the terms for the medium and long term. So if you're going to do a medium or long-term investment priority, individual firms under capitalism or even worker-controlled firms, they can't do that because they have to operate by a short-termist, logic and mentality. But an actual more powerful state, a democratic state, can make medium and long-term planning decisions, and there won't be the same constituency, like politicized constituency because there's not permanent managers and things like that. So right now, if you try to do something like that, there's immediately going to be a fossil fuel kind of lobbying group or whatnot. Right. Like I don't think the same dynamics would apply in a different sort of system.
We gotta go. We do actually have to go to the post game because we got to get some of that time in, and we're just all fucked up. But we got to do a real post game. But really quick, David Griscom, communism. What happens?
Communism.
Oh, I mean, I don't think it's too. I mean, honestly, I don't really think it's too worth it to jump into it with the
David,
blueprint.
these guys are total.
listen
Come
to me
on,
for a second.
they're mealy-mouthed apologists for the status quo.
But I think that
I think we know what they are. Just lay it out. Come on.
I think that you replace the system of competition with a system of association, and that challenges exactly the kind of logic that leads to the pollution of the earth that we're talking about. Where individuals who own an organization, they're putting the profits of that organization over the social cost for the rest of us, and putting production in the hands of the majority and in the hands of the demos is really going to radically change that. At least has a much larger potential to radically change that than any kind of individualized system that we have now.
Well, obviously, I agree with that in the abstract. We believe in kind of a free association of producers. The question is, how do you actually do it in condition of relative scarcity, right? We still need to ration resources. We still need to kind of motivate and compel each other to actually produce. So I think in the long run, we will live in some sort of fully automated, to use Bastani's thing, fully automated communism or whatever. But I think we're still in a condition of relative scarcity, particularly in the global south and other places that actually need to grow. So I think we need a growth, an environmentally sustainable, carbon zero growth socialism.
Yeah, and just one.
So, guys, how are you going to figure out how much tofu each of you get in your perfect little sissy system?
Well, that is a good question. But one last.
Ben's more Satan. Sorry, go ahead.
One last thing about this, though, I would also say that when you think about some of the stuff like the coal lobby, right? Because Destiny's point's going to be, oh, but wait a second, we could just get the coal lobby that's sponsored by the coal mining cooperative, and it would just be the same thing. And I think that the reason that the free association of consumers, even in the watered down bullshit Menshevik way that, that we're talking about, would impact that, goes to the same thing as, why the environmental record for state socialism was so bad. Well, because there's no democratic input, right? Even, East Germany was worse than West Germany because at least in West Germany, you could have an environmental movement that could make
West
noise.
Germany had a massive green movement.
Exactly. So, and by the same token, just the fact that so many more people would be in on the decision when somebody that instead of like 3 people in a room being like, hey, let's start the Coal Institute for Honesty about, clean coal, if somebody wanted to do this, even if you didn't have like whatever, a referendum on it or whatever, like even if it was like a management level decision, the next time there was a management election, there would be thousands of people thinking about this and talking about this. And this would be an obvious, huge issue in that election. Oh my God. Did you hear?
I mean, for what we know, I'm just to underline it before we go. I mean, from what we know, there's no reporting that I've seen, and this is, totally in the realm of what we're talking about. I mean, that the Madragon Collective in Spain has secretly funded AstroTurf organizations to debunk climate science or anything like that.
But part of it though is if you do have a system though that is built around firms competing and you're not regulating that competition, then firms are going to find a way to get an advantage on other firms. and they're going to exploit each other. They're going to exploit themselves even to accumulate market share and whatnot. So I think the key is you still need a state. You still need regulation. The thing that we don't like about capitalism is wage labor, because it means exploitation within the workplace. But under any form of socialism, even kind of I think we have a very similar vision of what a social society should look like. There's going to need the need for constant vigilance, for a free civil society, for like politics to continue. It can't, like, we used to think of socialism as the end of politics, but it just has
the
to be
enhancement of politics. But anyways, before the post game, David Grisham, the non-cuck version of our socialist future.
Oh, I just want to say that Lenin almost immediately instituted the largest natural preserve and national park program in history. So, interesting fact.
Socialism
what happened to
here in America.
What happened to him?
Well, he died.
Shot by an anarchist.
Wow.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, if he's so smart,
Boo.
what
Yes, indeed. Hiss.
I like the way David said it. David was just like, yeah, you know who did that? Lenin. So, yeah. Maybe you should give him a little bit of appreciation the next time you're jerking off some stupid Norway plan or whatever.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.